6:30, so I'll call the meeting to order, and then we'll do a roll call. I guess that's one way to find out. Renee?
I'm here.
That's right, I saw Mary. I don't see her, and Renee doesn't seem to be here.
She was on. I saw her.
Well, we'll go to Jack. I know Jack's here.
Yep, I'm here.
Mike?
Yes, I'm here.
And I'm also here, and I assume Mr. Eunice? Although I haven't heard. Okay. So at least 4 members of the Board of Selectmen are present, and also the town manager. So we'll go. And so we'll go on the discussion of the revote the date, venue of the annual town meeting. Mr. Eunice, did you have something you wanted to say on that?
Let me just, I have, Ken, just, as you know, from what the state has sent out, the numbers are going down, which is a good sign, and which has enabled the governor to start opening things up gradually into phase 1. The second slide just gives you a history of the last few town meetings. So other than meetings that had some major issues, we've generally been under 200 people at our town meetings. And this is a draft Chris Zahner is on that Chris can go over with you. Different things that the public safety officials have been working on that would be required at a town meeting. Chris, do you want to go over that?
Sure. So this was just kind of it was a draft to get us on in the right direction, and it's still a work in process. But we started with outside of the building. As people approach the high school, there would be cones set up 6 feet apart, keeping everybody at socially distances, and there'll be plenty of signage to tell them where to go, as well as NEMA and CERT team volunteers will be there to keep things orderly and make sure everybody's wearing a mask. And then we'll also have a police presence outside. The pre-entry screen would be the public health nurse and the school nurses taking temps, asking symptom and contact questions. And also we would have an assistant to each nurse dispensing hand sanitizer while the nurse is asking questions. So everybody will be scanned before they get in. They'll also have hand sanitizer. Check-in, volunteers will be using face shields, masks, gloves, while sitting behind the germ shield or germ guard, handing out baggies. This was kind of an idea from Beth Rossi to have put together small baggies with maybe a bracelet, paper bracelets to identify the residents. And also, a cheat pen for a written vote, piece of paper for written vote, a red card for a vote count, as well as a handy wipe. Signage will assist the check-in, as well as how to proceed to the gym. Cones in the hallways placed 6 feet apart to assist with social distancing, as well as more signage for guidance down the hall. Entry into the gym, we would have, again, NEMA, CERT teams, MRC, and face masks, face shields, and gloves guiding the residents to a socially distanced position in the gym. These positions will be pre-marked with chairs placed in a specific location to maintain the social distancing. And signage will be placed in multiple areas to reminding all the participants about wearing a mask at all times, maintain social distancing of 6 feet, and we would ask that everybody would raise their hand if they need to leave their designated area for any reason, whether it's to use the bathroom or to get up to use the microphone. And at that point, a volunteer would assist them to make sure they stay socially distanced from everybody and bring them right over to wherever they're going. If they leave the gym, they would come back in with more hand sanitizer. During the meeting, residents must have, I just said this basically, but they're going to raise their hands to approach the microphone. MRC volunteers to assist the residents safely to the microphone, and MRC volunteer will have a Clorox wipe to wipe the mic after every use. Participants are to remain in their designated area. If for any reason they need to leave, they want to raise their hand and be escorted by one of the volunteers. Restrooms, we would have volunteers to monitor the restrooms, limit the amount of people using the restroom at one time. And I'm not sure of that number yet because I'd have to see the bathrooms to understand what kind of social distance we could have. Have hand sanitizer available to, sanitizer wipes, I should have put wipes, available to wash down surfaces, and hand sanitizer at the door of the gym for re-entry. Cones in the hall, again, outside of the bathroom to maintain social distancing, as well as signage. And then at the conclusion of the meeting, the volunteers will escort the residents while maintaining social distancing out of the building in an orderly fashion. And I also added that we'd have waste receptacles, I'm having trouble speaking tonight, available for used gloves and masks, so we don't see them all over the parking lot like we do at the grocery store. So that's kind of where we're at right now. This was only our second meeting, and I brought this to the table today just to kind of get us in a direction and give us something an idea to kick around, and we're looking for any input that anybody might have.
Chris, in the gymnasium at the high school, with the 6-foot social distancing, what would be the capacity of the gym?
Currently, the gym is just over 12,000 square feet. And we did the math with the 6-foot separation all the way around, and it's just over 300 people. I think it's like 330.
And I would assume, like, if the husbands and wives came in, there'd be some places maybe with 2 chairs and 6 feet, or no?
I think we, judge it on the crowd, I guess, but I think we're planning on everybody staying 6 feet apart.
Okay.
Chris, can I say something, please?
Yeah.
Sure, certainly.
Okay, thank you. As far as check-in, I'd like to meet with you as far as that goes with my check-in people, and the way to check in, if you don't mind.
Oh, absolutely.
I think we should meet with that because I have my own thoughts for that as far as how our normal check-in goes and our distance and all that. So I would really like to meet with you as far as that goes before anything happens.
I'll invite you to the next meeting.
Well, thank you. I was off today and I did not get an invite, but that's fine, no problem. So
I apologize. That was my fault.
Don't apologize. It's fine. But I think as far as the check-in, that falls under my jurisdiction, and I really would like some say on that and how we handle it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments or suggestions?
No, Mr. Chairman, but it seems like a well thought out plan, Chris. It's hard to anticipate everything and contemplate all the scenarios that you'd be faced with. So, best of luck, and we're going to do the best we can. Well done.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
this is Bill DeVere, your short-time moderator here. One thing that, and again, keep in mind that anything I say can easily be changed by whichever gentleman wins the election and becomes the new moderator, probably by the time you play it. But my suggestion with microphones is to minimize the movement of people around. I would think you'd be better off, rather than having people go to the microphone, I'd rather have volunteers take portable microphones to the people as they're recognized by the moderator. That way you don't have people moving. If there are already volunteers in here doing that, they can carry wipes, they can take the microphones right to the people. That way you don't have any, you minimize any risk and problem going around. That would be one of my things. And I'm glad that the town clerk spoke up, because the town clerk definitely has to be and should be intimately involved in the whole process to make sure that how the meeting is set up. So those are my two suggestions.
Yeah, the portable microphones is an excellent idea. It's going to keep the people the 6 feet apart. They don't have to worry about, infringing on other people's territory to get where they have to be.
I appreciate that info. Thank you. The input.
So, Chris, this is Renee.
Yeah.
I would also add to that in your plan to have specific, what's the one, like directional traffic, so people are always going one way, right? So you enter through an aisle. If you're going to exit, you're going to exit the opposite end. You're not going to have people going back and forth.
Passing each other, right?
Yeah.
Yep. That was further down the road. We're going to put together a map. But yes, I agree with you.
The other thing too is I don't see, again, we talked about the last couple meetings. I personally don't have an appetite to have a town meeting inside when we have the ability to do it outside. I don't see any plans for that, so I don't know if you guys have considered that, but I know that's certainly going to be our discussion tonight.
It would, at this point, we were basically talking about in the gym. Again, we've only had, this was only our second meeting on this, so we're looking for all info and input that we can get.
Sure.
Anyone else have any input or questions?
Yeah.
Chris? Yes.
I like the decisions, and I'm going to be there at the town meeting with my mask, and I'm going to be prepared.
Okay, thank you, Peter.
Well,
Hey, Brad, can I ask a quick question?
No. Yes, of course you
Excellent.
can.
Mike, you showed one of the town meetings, I think it said like June 3rd of 2019. It was kind of like your outlier for the number of people who went. Do you remember what was on that agenda that threw the numbers so high?
That was on the town building project.
Okay.
I mean, personally, I think what we should do is we should review the questions on the warrant and do what has to be done and delay things that can wait.
Yeah, I know that's not on our agenda tonight, and I know we're planning on doing that. I just wanted to ask just to see, obviously that's something that's sitting on the agenda now, so, or on on the warrant now.
Brad,
Yes.
on that, could I just ask, I think Lauren is on, and I know the planning board was concerned about holding their public hearings and then there not being a town meeting. But I just wanted Lauren to talk about when they have to hold a town meeting after their public hearing, the latest they can do that.
Certainly. Mr. Chairman, is that okay?
Certainly.
Okay. So typically, the town meeting has to be held no later than 65 days after the date of the public hearing. And the issue for many communities is that they had their public hearings a long time ago, so more than 64 days ago, 65 days, and also they're concerned that if an article appears, a zoning article appears on the warrant, that failure to act on it will constitute negative action for purposes of Chapter 40A, Section 5. In one of the versions of the bills that is out in the world right now with the legislature, there is language that extends that deadline. It basically says even if the public hearing was more than 65 days ago, it's still able to be acted upon. And the language also suggests that not acting on zoning, or at least it provides that not acting on zoning is not quote unquote unfavorable action for purposes of Chapter 40A, Section 5. So in terms of crafting motions, if the 65 days aren't at issue, we can certainly do something like refer to committee rather than just pass over, and that would address the 2-year ban on zoning amendments that are acted upon negatively by town meeting.
It's my impression, but it's only an impression, that the planning board would be receptive probably to hold off on any planning articles and visit them in the fall town meeting. And they'd have a long period of time for the COVID problems to hopefully subside. And it would basically take them off of its warrant and put them on the fall meeting.
So Brad, again, I know that's not on the agenda, but I wouldn't make that assumption because one of the zoning articles is not coming from the planning board.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'd like to ask a question, maybe of town council. I can bring up a procedural point. I understand what Lauren is telling us about not voting on the article does not mean rejection, so that it gets us by state law. However, I know that we have town bylaws that say that if an elected board puts an article on the warrant, the selectmen must include it. And if that is accurate, or if there's a petition article, I believe the selectmen have to include it. So if those articles are on the warrant, we have a town bylaw that says any article that does not receive a motion is declared lost by the moderator. So my question is, does that have an effect on the 2-year time limit and the zoning question?
You're muted, Lauren.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, if I may?
Yeah, you may.
Okay, thank you. So that is a really good point, and that's why I would recommend that if those articles stay on the warrant, that the motion, instead of it just being the motion fails for lack, the article fails for lack of a motion, that any zoning articles get referred to committee for further action, and it might be easier just to do that generally with any of the articles, depending on how that works. One of the drafts of the bills as well that's pending basically says if a town votes to reduce the quorum, that it would act only on essentially financial articles relevant to this fiscal year and next fiscal year. So again, none of this is law yet, so we're kind of speculating. And I do think that that there are versions of the bill that clarify whether locally petitioned articles, whether that's a petition by a board that's allowed to do so, or an elected official, or by registered voters, to address how to deal with that. Unfortunately, we just aren't going to know which version of the bill is going to move forward right now. As I understand it, it's just kind of sitting. I believe it made its way from the Senate to the House. So anything that the House passed that's different than what the Senate passed would have to be, worked out through a conference committee. So I think we have at least a couple of weeks before we know whether the law in its final form will be helpful to address some of these issues. Certainly, we're staying on top of it, and to the extent that any information happens, any movement, we'll be letting towns know right away. So you'll know as soon as we know, and if we know ahead of time, or if you do, please share. So, but I think we're in a little bit of a wait and see mode, no matter what.
Okay.
Yeah,
I just don't. Go
Mr.
ahead.
Chairman, if I may, one of my major concerns was just that, especially with petition articles, those are generally, if they're of wide enough interest, those can draw people. And so my fear is that I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I believe one of the zoning articles is a petition article. And if that is on there, and if enough people come and force action on it, then there's a question of whether the planning board is taking action on it. And I just, Lauren would obviously would understand this a heck of a lot better than I would. But I just want to make sure that we don't wind into a situation where somebody can see this and go, hey, wait a minute, we have to put this on the warrant. There's probably not going to be a lot of people there. We can go and we can get this done and take care of something like that. It would be good if obviously, if the state told us, if we knew those rules going in, because I think that's important to plan your meeting properly so that you don't set yourself up for something like that.
Brad,
Yes, Mr. Units.
I don't believe we have a petition article on the warrant.
Well, then that would be really good.
Excuse me, Chair. This is
Yes.
Bobby Giuseppe. I can confirm with the town manager, we don't have a petition article. One was submitted by the planning board and the other was by the Industrial Development Commission.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
in one of the versions of the bill that I'm aware of, it specifically says that any petitioned articles, whether it's petitioned by a voter or by a board or committee under a local charter, that article automatically go on to the next warrant for town meeting, and that this impediment under zoning be essentially brushed aside and treated as a nullity. Regardless, for your town in particular, I would say that you would, let's just say you have articles on the warrant that you don't want to address, rather than taking no action and saying lost for failure to make a motion, anything that's zoning related should be referred to committee for further study. If that bill doesn't come through. And that is not negative action. I know that's double negative for purposes of chapter 48, section 5. And so it could come back before town meeting, with or without the support of the planning board.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
just a clarifying question. If we have yet to post the warrants for town meeting, we can remove most of the articles from that, correct? Or ask the relevant bodies to vote to remove them, correct? Rather than going through any other tricks.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, please.
So that really depends on, and I wouldn't characterize it as tricks, Jack. I would characterize it as procedural maneuvering to achieve an outcome. I know that sounded very lawyer-like. To achieve a reasonable outcome. I think the point here is that if the goal of planning the meeting is to reduce the number of matters so that people are together for the shortest period of time, then the question of what has to be acted upon versus what people might like to act on might be two different things. I'm sorry, the warrant under, and I'm switching over to look at your charter, but sometimes a charter will say the date the warrant closes. And so even if you delayed the date of holding it, it might still be that the warrant is kind of in the form it's going to be in. So I will look at that while you guys keep talking, and I'm happy to give an update as soon as you're ready for me.
Warrant is closed.
Sorry, Mr. Yates?
The warrant has closed.
Okay. So typically, once it's closed under a charter, no changes can be made to what's on there. And that's the position that a lot of communities are finding themselves in.
It's closed for submittal of articles, but the selectmen have not finalized the warrant yet.
Mm-hmm. So again, I can look at the exact charter language, but as I recall, yours says it's closed to all articles, including the Board of Selectmen's, by a particular date. And if that's the case, then you can't go back and take things on and off. You could, however, and again, for the moderator working with the board and the clerk can figure out which articles require action and which don't. And I do think a moderator can kind of lay out the procedure that the moderator intends to follow at town meeting, which would be, let's just say there's a reduction in the quorum. It would be to say, by state law, assuming the law passes, we're only allowed to take up items that are financial in nature, which include the following. I will not be able to accept any motions on other articles, and I will be accepting a motion to refer to committee all articles other than da-da-da. So that the stage is set ahead of time, everybody knows what the rules are, and we don't have a situation where a particular interest group of whatever kind shows up to try to impact the outcome, believing that other people won't come. So identifying what will be acted upon and how, I think may help to kind of normalize the procedure without the worry that, people would use the opportunity inappropriately. And I shouldn't say inappropriately, legally, but in a way that perhaps disadvantaged absentees.
So Lauren, if I can ask, because I thought you said the last meeting when you were with us that we could remove articles up until we actually post it.
Okay.
And we've done that in the past, so I'm just confused on that point.
So maybe that may be fine. I will just take a moment. I'm going to switch away. You won't know it. I mean, you won't know, but I'm going to look at the charter quickly. Okay. So just if Mr. Chair, if you'd be willing to give me a minute to go and check that out.
Certainly, go for it. Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions or input?
Do we just want to get down to number 2 and talk about a date and a venue?
Sure. Good, go for it. I personally think that the high school gymnasium would be a good location. I would be interested in finding, well, I guess Chris has indicated 200 and some that can hold with the 6-foot personal space. That would be my preference. I don't mind outside. The only problem I have is outside is that people always seem to have a problem hearing, and I'm concerned about the location of the school is basically in wetland. So I'm concerned about mosquitoes and other things like that might interrupt the meeting and cause people to be hesitant. Besides the coronavirus, but the threat of mosquito-borne diseases being spread out there also.
I mean, I think that we have less of a risk of that if we hold it during the day and not in the evening hours. So, and I'm going to go back to the information that came out from the governor's office, right? The advisory committee. So one of the themes throughout all of the phases is outdoor services encouraged. So that was, of course, in respect to worship, but they do kind of echo that when they get to phase 2 and phase 3, especially when they start talking about different things like activities that you can do and focusing on those being in the outdoor area. So that's number 1. I mean, I think, it's a couple things like what's been discussed or what's been provided up to this point has focused on increased airflow, outdoor activities. I mean, if you look at schools like Denmark, they went back to school and they're doing outdoor classes and it's proved to be very successful. So I think that, I honestly think when I look at the safety of doing it indoors or outdoors, with the social distancing, I think it's still a safer bet if we do it outdoors. Now, logistically, yes, it's going to be more difficult. And potentially, like in that case, we might want to pick 2 dates so that we have 2 dates on the calendar should we have an issue with weather or something else. But I don't think it's the other thing that certainly within phase 1 and phase 2, they're talking about, well, they do phase 3 as well, but phase 1 and phase 2, they're very specific about high-risk populations not being out in the general public. And, again, I mean, that's probably going to have more relevance in respect to the phases, because really it's not until, the 3rd phase when they say the same thing, but then they talk about there could be adjustments made as well. So that's, again, I pull that just from the information that I've read from the advisory information that was provided. I think it's a safer option. Logistically, it's going to be more difficult. If there's an issue with sound, I think that we can have some test runs to work through that, but I feel for the residents that that's the better option.
And speaking of, the susceptible population, I'm concerned because historically susceptible citizens have always made up a good percentage of the members of the people that show up for town meeting. And I don't want to scare people away who would normally be there. So regardless, but I appreciate your opinion. It's just that I personally think that the gymnasium would be better, but what do I know? Yes, Mike.
Would we run into accessibility issues outside? Has Chris or Beth or anybody taken a look at that to see if that is something we should be concerned with?
I would think there'd be a problem with like wheelchairs and accessibility getting on the fields if they have need walking assistance or something like that, but I'm not an expert.
Like, Mr. Chair, if I could say.
Yes, Chris.
Mike, like I was saying earlier, when the outdoor thing was brought up earlier, we haven't even looked at that yet. We started off with the gym because that was where it was originally supposed to be. Well, it was going to be in the auditorium, but we've always reached out for the gym when the auditorium's not going to work out. So I believe, though, that if we were looking at outdoor, we would definitely have to consider ADA compliance. We have to allow for the handicap to get in as well. So the other thing that the sound system is, it'd be a lot of extra work, but I think that you could basically take the plan that I have and modify it slightly for outdoors if we had to do it that way. But again, we haven't even looked at that yet, and we will do so.
Thanks, Chris.
Anyone else on the board have an opinion or questions?
I'm not on the board, but may I speak?
Well, certainly.
Okay, thank you. Just if it does go outside, I think what we have to also take into consideration is checking in the people outside. But I'm sure we'll all work together, and but there will be issues as far as that goes on my end. That's all.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, it's Jack.
Yes, Jack.
I just want to acknowledge that I think there's no real good solution here. You're trading off some risks for others. While the open air of outside is helpful, you're now more likely to have issues with weather. Sound issues are going to be harder to do. The accessibility is there. At the same time, being inside at a closed space with potentially poor ventilation, making sure people maintain distance, it's tough. And for me, that goes back to when do we want to try to have this meeting? Do we need to try to have it now while we're still working our way through the phases, or can we hold off and do a 1/12 budget for a period of time to try to get some more certainty around how people can adapt and overcome these challenges?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I don't know if Lauren's back on yet, but one of the things I wanted to ask her, one of the area towns, I heard the other night they were talking about their town meeting, and they were going to only address the financial articles, and they were actually going to do a consent warrant. So one motion, say there's 4 financial articles, one motion for articles 1 through 4, and which would greatly speed up the time of the meeting.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I
Yes.
think there have been several different concepts about how to best approach the warrant and the action at town meeting, and also where town meeting should be. In terms of inside, whether it should be inside or outside, I agree with Selectman Conway that there are trade-offs no matter what. We can't have a town meeting in a place that doesn't provide for accessibility. So there has to be, and I'm sure, you know, as was indicated, this is the very beginning of planning stages, but that's something that would have to be addressed. We need to provide reasonable accommodation. We need to provide an accessible location. So we would have to look at, you know, are there particular areas that would be more accessible than others and that kind of thing. A bunch of towns are talking about doing essentially what they're calling a timed entry to town meeting. That's something else that you could think about. And I think there's essentially saying like everyone in precinct 1, you can come at this time and you can come at that time in precinct 2, trying to reduce potential bottlenecks at the check-in. But I think there's a lot of different aspects of that. In terms of the warrant, many communities are considering doing kind of an intro town meeting, or some call it a mini town meeting or a pre-town meeting, where they would do a conversation like this with anyone who wanted to appear. And then the motions made at town meeting would be limited based upon the type of feedback that was received during the call. So, you know, the FinCom's motion would essentially be what they believe is appropriate for the town, but then also what they believe the town would support. And so that consent calendar motion or the consent motion would reflect what their understanding was of kind of the feeling of the room. That's one option. The option to hold, you know, a forum, an informational forum, or more than one informational forum to kind of talk through the questions that would usually come up at town meeting. And then all of that balanced against the expense, the time resources and human resources that need to be devoted to planning the meeting, and whether it does make more sense to do, and what I've been calling it is the not 1/12 budget, because it is 1/12. It's 1/12 of what you would expect your operating expenses to be, but it's also crafted so as to allow towns to include things in the July or August budget that they would normally pay for at that time. So insurance, pension amounts, regional school district amounts. So that's why I've been calling it the not 1/12 budget. And the question of whether, you know, there's something proposed that's significantly different than last year so that people would really want to weigh in on that right away, or whether it's more appropriate to wait until later in the season when there's more known about how to, you know, number one, how safe or not safe it is, and number two, whether there's any learning from other communities. I don't think there's any right answer, and I don't think there's any wrong answer. Whatever the answer is, it's going to take a lot of planning, and I think we're all going to be able to poke holes in any of the plans because you know, that's what they are. They're plans that haven't been tested before. So with that said, there's no reason you couldn't use a consent motion. That would be one motion for all the articles, and it could be set forth in a document entitled whatever, which is online. You know, those are going to be kind of procedural. There will be procedural mechanisms to try and help limit the time people need to be together in person.
Mr. Chairman? Oh, I'm
Yes,
sorry.
Mr. Coogan.
Yeah, a couple of things. First of all, I think Mr. Units explained a little bit and Lauren explained a little bit, but a consent warrant, which I don't recall us ever using in all my years going to North, but it is something that's commonly used around the Commonwealth. That's basically you take, you know, there's to greatly simplify it, the document, you say, all right, Articles 1, 2, 7, 12, 14, 37, let's put all those together and let's take one vote on them. And that's basically what that does. And it is more efficient, but I'm getting to the point now where I'm going to ask the board, what is your point of holding a town meeting? Is your point of holding a town meeting to actually have the town meeting and have the discussion and the debate that normally goes with these things, such as it is? Or is your goal to simply have the mechanism where you can get your budget done, you can get the main financial articles done, and be over with it? Because in my opinion, a town meeting, you either have a town meeting or you don't. If you're not really going to, if you're only going to have a town meeting in name only, where the whole goal is just to get your articles voted and then it's over, then I think there are better ways to do that than to ask people to, in essence, somewhat risk their lives in coming out to a meeting to have it. If you're actually going to have debate, you know, like the whole idea of the budget article on a consent warrant scares the living crap out of me. I hate that idea. And I think that if you're going to have a town meeting, it needs to be a town meeting. If you can't have a town meeting where discussion occurs and the major things are going to be done, then I don't think you should have it. I can tell you from talking to other moderators, there are a lot of towns doing outside. There are a lot of towns doing inside. I don't know exactly how it's split, but there are many towns doing outside. And I understand, as Lauren so very rightly said, we can poke holes in any kind of plan that we come up with. But, you know, to worry about mosquitoes outside and all this and access, we put on a Founders Day that's sponsored by the town in June, and we had probably a heck of a lot more people than, you know, come to it than will come to this town meeting. I guarantee you that. And those things didn't seem to be a problem. We didn't seem to have problems with access. We didn't seem to have problems with mosquitoes. It's like, it seems to me that we're sort of inventing problems that we didn't worry about before. Now, granted, we didn't have a virus before, and I totally understand that. But if the concerns are mosquitoes and access, I don't see those, you know, being a problem. I think we just need to get onto what the purpose of the meeting is. If you just want to get the budget done, I would strongly suggest go to a 112 budget, wait until July or August or whenever, and have a meeting then where you can have a real town meeting and actually have debate. But I would, and this is only me personally, I would strongly object to having, you know, all the financial articles, and particularly the budget. I would strongly object to having that in a consent warrant and to having a town meeting that's actually a joke. I don't want to have a town meeting that's a joke.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman? This is
Yes.
Michael. Hang on to your socks, Bill. I actually agree with what you're saying. So, if we're going to have a town meeting, I believe, as a participant myself, you know, we should have every opportunity to ask any questions we want to ask. Getting back to the outside, the only other concern I would have about having an outside would be use of portable microphones outside. I'm not sure how they'll work. If they'll work as well as they do inside. That's just throwing that out there. I have no idea one way or the other if it'll work or not. My other thing is on the seating in the gymnasiums, it was mentioned that we would set up single chairs, but the other opportunity would be to take and put in a section of double chairs where people actually can sit together. My wife and I want to go, we can actually sit together. And in my opinion, that would open up quite a bit more seating inside a gymnasium than if you just had single chairs all over the gym. Number one. Number two, if my wife and I did go together, we'd probably meet halfway in between anyway and sit together anyway. So another opportunity for additional seating would be to look at the possibility of having one section with double chairs, another section with single chairs, and if for one reason or another we run out of one or the other, we can always modify as we go. I think using double chairs together will open up a lot more space. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Joe Vieira. I apologize for being late to a meeting, but I was in another Zoom. Earlier today, just for information, Mike, I'm sorry I didn't get to you. I've just been in Zoom meetings all day. I should have before this meeting. We were informed that the Mass Department of Public Health is not allowing for schools to be used for anything until the governor says so. He has closed the schools and its facilities until the end of June, and he has not put us on the agenda for any of the phases in his announcement on the 18th. I don't know if anyone else heard that. And the reason why that came out is that a number of school systems have put together rolling graduations and graduations on football fields with only the graduates and social distancing. And they received notices today that the Mass Department of Public Health is saying no, that does not go along with the advice or the request from the governor. So again, Norton Public Schools is absolutely open to the town of Norton. We will do anything that you folks want, but I'll defer to Chris, who probably knows better than I do from the public health office, but that's what we heard today on the call. We were actually told that if you're thinking about using your facilities during the month of June for graduation, to actually not consider doing it.
Thank you, Doc. Yes.
So based on the superintendent's comments, I think it's really important for us to all bear in mind that this is a very uncertain time that we're in terms of trying to make definite plans. I think, it's best if there's specific nitty-gritty plans to be made, that be left to the individuals who can try and figure that out as we get closer. But I do believe that the issue of choosing a day, if a day is possible, is probably a good place to start. Because obviously, if we don't have the town, if we don't have schools and we can't use those parking lots, then that starts a whole nother discussion about where we would go and how we would do that. One of the pieces in one of the bills is also to allow a town to use to help hold a town meeting in a neighboring municipality, and that could open up some other issues. At this point, though, that hasn't passed. So, I think this is the kind of information that we're hearing in pieces. I have every reason to believe the governor wouldn't have anticipated that response, since he didn't say there'll be no elections and no town meetings. And most of us here know that elections and town meetings, almost as a rule, happen in schools or some schools. So I think, there's a bit of flexibility that we're all going to need to commit to, no matter what plans are made, generally or otherwise.
And if I may, Laura, that includes, we're working with the Xfinity Center. The Xfinity Center is where our graduation takes place, and I know that's one of the sites you're looking at, and I think it's a great site, by the way. They are not part of phase one. They have actually just filed, their owner just filed this week, this is through my building principal, for graduation. They have filed to be considered a drive-in, to see if they can get that waived to be considered drive-in. They can actually hold graduations in the month of June, considering that all their concerts are off. So hopefully they get it, but they've also petitioned the Board of Health in Mansfield, because its own location is in Mansfield, for the right to be able to do that. And then for us, Chris will hear tomorrow from our administration on us taking a look at using the Xfinity Center for something like that too. So who knows?
With what Dr. Bader has told us about the schools not being able to be used, how is that going to impact a possible town election? Which
There was a Senate,
point.
Brad, I know there was a Senate
Yes.
I know there was a Senate election held yesterday
Correct.
in Plymouth County, and I'm sure they use schools, but we can check on that.
I believe, based on the discussion I heard today, the Mass Department of Public Health found out about certain things to do with graduation. I also believe that your local Board of Health has authority, sorry, Chris, to put you on the spot, to hear a plan, look at a plan, and if the plan meets the requirements, to check off on the plan, like an election or even a town meeting or any of that. My comment was just in relation to, has anybody checked with the potential that a school facility can be used? I don't know that, because I haven't asked. I just asked for purposes of graduation, which for us always takes place off. Whatever the decision is, Norton Public Schools, as far as I'm concerned, is in full support of whatever the board chooses to do. And the only question I have is I have to take it to my 5 bosses, but my recommendation would be to support the selectmen, whatever decision you make.
Thank you.
Sure. The one
Yes.
thing to add to this conversation is I think the issue of who has charge of making these decisions and how they're going to be made is less set in stone than we might imagine. And so we hear things from the DPH one day, we hear things from the Board of Health Association another day. It's very difficult to say right now exactly where those lines are. Even the governor's authority obviously is based upon the authority given to him under the Civil Defense Act. And so we're seeing all sorts of pushback happening now. I know several businesses were very upset they weren't included in phase 1 or phase 2. There was a Boston Globe front page article today about the restaurants in the North End. So I think we're going to see some territorial pushback on all of this. And obviously that's going to have an effect on what your options are.
Brad, can I ask one or
Yes,
two
ma'am.
questions?
Certainly.
More in the legislation you were talking about for the potential to hold meetings in neighboring towns. Do you know a potential time frame on that? Like
So,
3 weeks more?
My understanding is that the Senate did pass something like that. It's sitting at the House right now. There's been no action on it since it's been there. I know for sure that the Senate leadership and the House leadership know this is an important issue. So, I'm keeping my fingers crossed that within the next couple of weeks, we'll have some guidance. It impacts, towns that are looking to have town meetings outside of their own towns, but that's also the reduction of the quorum legislation and the remote meetings for representative town meeting legislation. So it's got a lot in it.
Okay, and then my second question is, can we pick a meeting date without a venue? Could we have the venue to be determined with the fluidity of the situation?
So, Mr. Chair, through you, you wouldn't be posting a warrant right now, and so there wouldn't be an absolute necessity to have picked a location at this time. You need to know, obviously, well enough in advance, because no matter what, you're going to need to come up with a safety plan, and I do think that requires coordination between various departments, as well as with the Board of Health and the police department. So those are, and DPW. So those are factors that will come into play no matter what. Could you set a date to aim for? Certainly. And again, with the caveat that I don't think anyone should get too dug in on, on plans at this point. That the best we can do is try to aim in that direction.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mike.
I would just hope the board would consider Thursday, June 25th as the date for the meeting.
Anyone else have any, does anyone have any comments or questions regarding that?
So my comment to that, Brad, is that that keeps us within phase 2. I think we should be looking at a date after phase 3. So phase 3, assuming that each phase did only last 3 weeks and we were able to progress to the next phase, we're looking at least to June 29th. And then I would give us some time within that. I would say within that 3 weeks after June 29th for potential guidance and guidelines to be provided that would open up additional opportunities. Because a lot of what's listed for June for phase 3 is, based on the trends that they'll be seeing over the previous 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Units.
If that was the point, then we might as well wait to the end of July, because the goal of June 25th is so we can have a budget in place before July 1. If we wait until June 29th, we only have June 29th and June 30th to hold the meeting. Then we're into the next fiscal year.
No, I'm sorry, Mike, I'll clarify. I meant 3 weeks after June 29th. I was referring to July. I think our best option at this point, and kind of back to what Bill was saying earlier, the purpose of town meeting is to have the discussion, and I think because of that, we should move forward with the 1/12 budget and look at a date near the end of July.
And Mr. Chairman, as I've said before, I would hope we wouldn't have to do the 1/12 budget. I think everyone here that has to work on that, both at the schools and the town, would all prefer to have a budget in place than have to prepare 1/12 budgets, but that's up to the board.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Kubiak.
I totally understand what the town manager is saying, and I'd prefer to be 6'4" and handsome. Unfortunately, I'm stuck with what I've been given. And I think if the choice comes down erring on the side of safety for the residents or making the process as painless for the town as possible, I would firmly come down on the side of the resident, of, keeping the safety of the residents. I think, I took a very unscientific, unreliable, perhaps you can call it meaningless, poll on Facebook, just yesterday. And I just asked people it was in the Invested Norton Facebook page, because that's where I know there were a lot of Norton citizens who at least are active in town government. And I asked them I asked them 3 questions, but one of the questions was, would you come to a town meeting held inside in June, and yes or no? And something like 56 or 57 people answered that question. And 91% of them said no, they would not come to a town meeting in the month of June inside. I think they have a legitimate case, and I understand that there are many other communities that are going to hold, the town meeting. But if we can have a 1/12 budget and we can get by for a month, and then we can have, hopefully, who knows what July is going to bring. I don't know if it's going to get better, if it's going to get worse. None of us know for sure. But the odds are that it will get better. And then we could have a real town meeting with real discussion, and the system could work as it was. I think the inconvenience and the problems, while they're very real, I think could easily be overcome. And I think what it boils down to, and I submit to the selectmen, that your constituents are very concerned about having to come to a town meeting in the next, 30 or 45 days for health reasons. And they should be. They very much should be. So I just believe, again, it's my personal opinion, but I believe you should only have a town meeting if there is no other option. And frankly, ladies and gentlemen, there are other options. And those options don't endanger the lives of Norton citizens. And I think that that's the overriding concern here.
Well, Mr. Gouvier, I appreciate what you just said, because being one of those people who shouldn't be going out in public to open meetings or anything else, I'm not thrilled about the idea about going to a meeting at this time either. So I totally agree with your sentiments there. And I did read numerous replies to your survey, and it was quite overwhelming, the fact that, people are scared and people don't want to take a chance. And it's nice to see that people are actually taking something seriously. Some of the feedback I get from my daughter, who's in the healthcare field, and both of them, who I've been lucky enough that they run my errands, and some of the things they run into out there, we probably wouldn't be as bad off if everyone took it as seriously. But personally, I think the longer we can put it off, the better. Personally, I would feel more comfortable not going to a town meeting, but in these circumstances.
Mr. Chairman, it's
Yes.
Mary.
Yes,
Since none of us really know what's going to be happening in the next couple weeks, is there any reason why we can't plan the meeting for 6:25 and then postpone it if we have to?
Shut up. Excuse me. Excuse me. Mike, can you answer, Mr. Unitas, can you answer the question that Mary just asked?
So if you can schedule, I think this is what Mary was saying, schedule the meeting for Thursday, June 25th. And if things don't progress with the disease as they are progressing right now, where things seem to be improving and you don't feel comfortable, then you can always cancel it and reschedule.
What would be I hate to say it, drop dead date for cancellation and pushing it out?
Well, the date for the selectmen to cancel it would be 10 days before that.
Okay, so
Because it's really 7 days, but figuring 10 days would give you some more leeway. Or the moderator could reschedule it that night. And Lauren can correct me if I'm wrong. But by our charter, a town meeting, if you don't have a special, which by this point it's so late in the process, I don't see that we need a special. So the annual gets posted with recommendations 7 days before the town meeting. And so as long as you change the date before that, you can reschedule it.
Mr. Chair, so chapter
Yes.
39, section 9 was amended as part of the provisions of chapter 53 of the Acts of 2020. And in that, basically, the Board of Selectmen has the ability to delay the meeting, provided that all the business is wrapped up by June 30th, unless there's a declaration of emergency and the board essentially determines that it's not safe to hold a meeting. So if the board makes that determination and the warrant has not yet been posted, the board retains the ability to push forward the date. If the warrant has been posted, then the authority to delay the meeting switches from the selectman to the moderator after consultation with public health and safety officials. I think the issue that we've been getting the most feedback on from communities is that there's an interest in certainty. And so, I think that part of the decision-making tree here has to include, when is it reasonable for the town to decide that it's too much work to set up, to go forward, to have a safety plan and put everything in place versus making a 1/12 budget. So I think it's, again, that legally it's permissible up until the warrant is posted for the board to decide to delay. Communication with residents is going to be probably the most important part of any of this. And also how much time and energy would be invested in planning for a meeting, which you want to call off at some point. And again, that's not a legal issue, that's a policy decision for those of you that are elected to make policies. So.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Units, from the way I look at it, regardless of what we decide for a date, if we were to decide the 25th tonight, you would still have to, in my mind, work on a 1/12 budget anyways, because you aren't going to want to do it, starting like on, 10 days, the 15th of June, to start working on the 1/12 budget then. I mean, I could be wrong, but to me, it's going to have to be, the work is going to have to be done anyways, because just in case it has to be canceled. Am I incorrect? Or?
No, you're correct, but it would give us a timeline for the finance committee to work with, to review all budgets, to be prepared.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, couldn't they do that anyway? Based on the budget that's been presented so far, I don't see why, if we had the meeting, say, at the end of July versus June 25th, they could still do their meetings now.
Well, I don't know why, what would the incentive be why would we keep doing that? We would probably delay until, if we're going to delay a meeting to July, then we might as well delay the whole process.
I don't know if I agree with that. I think that allows us to spend more time and allows the board to have more involvement in helping to determine the priorities, which is something that the FinCom has been asking for. So,
yeah, I just don't understand. If you schedule a meeting for June 25th and it has to be canceled, it has to be canceled. So, what is the issue with that? Why can't you schedule a meeting for June 25th and maybe we'll be able to have it? Maybe we won't, but
Mr. Chair? Just 1 second, please. And that's what I was trying to say is, if we go and schedule it for June 25th, it's not going to stop you or the rest of the town managers, department heads, from having to work on a 1/12 budget, because we're going to have it in place just in case anyways.
Right.
Correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
this is Bill Rotundi,
Yeah.
FinCom. So, you know, I'm one of those individuals who sees no point in being indoors for this meeting. So I'm okay with trying to do our work as diligently as possible. But I'm just going to throw out there, why would you pick a date of the 25th, which pins you into indoors at night versus, say, the 27th, which gives you the option in, out, and you can plan accordingly, weather permitting. So I don't know why we're sticking to a Thursday night, which requires an indoor meeting, which people on a very unprofessional poll, no offense, Bill, have basically said they're not interested in going to. So I don't know why we're picking a date that requires it to be indoors. If you got to do it in June, you might as well give yourself the flexibility, indoors or outdoors.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
So if you schedule on June 27th and it rains, then
you move it indoors.
Or you have tents. I mean, why
Or
would
you have
plan for
tents.
that?
But if you do it on a weekend during the day, there aren't usually mosquitoes during the day in June, unlike August, September. So that's probably not an issue. It's warm enough, so you don't have to worry about people being cold. And it gives you the flexibility of, well, if we can plan for outdoors. If the weather doesn't cooperate, well, then I guess we'll have to do it indoors. But it doesn't set it in stone today, because I believe your town council has also said flexibility.
Is back, people are auditioning from home and sending them in. Have you seen any good stuff?
Anybody who's not talking, just mute themselves, please. There's some TV noise going on in the background.
Brad?
Brad, you have to unmute yourself. Or Mike, unmute Brad.
Brad, I muted everybody, so anyone that wants to talk has to unmute themselves. Not bad.
Okay, now I'm all set. I couldn't figure out how it happened. I didn't touch it. I swear I didn't. You're not talking to Mr. Technology yet.
Brad, Joe Bader for a comment, if you don't mind. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand the conversation, pretty clearly in terms of the safety and also the intent of what a town meeting should be in terms of the business of the town, as Bill has suggested, and that's the rationale and not just an article. My concerns with the 1/12 are always going to be around a couple of different things. And for me, as the biggest employer of the town, it's going to be, what does a full year's budget look like? Mike and I are already having conversations that right now we're at 2.5, which is approximately $730,000, $40,000 for the school department. But there's the potential that the October town meeting, we could be reshuffling all of those numbers again because Chapter 70 was cut, or there was further cuts in the general budget, or the local receipts and the local budget. Tomorrow, I think it's tomorrow or Friday, we're going to hear about yet local receipts going down at the state level pretty significantly for the month. And what that means for the biggest employer is an inconsistency, or an inability, I should say, to have a budget, which therefore means I've got to lay off even more people because I don't know what the number is for September, which means a higher cost to the town side on June 16th, when people can begin to collect unemployment, and they would continue to collect that unemployment during the 1/12th. So at least for the month of July, and potentially based on the conversation I received today from the Mass Association of School Committees, superintendents, we've been told August at best for a budget. If any of that is potentially true, we would have better numbers around Chapter 70. But I guess my point that I'm making going around here is it's important to also look at what this potentially means in terms of further costs to the town, because we're not working off of if you will, the best budget numbers that we have, which right now are reflective that Chapter 70 isn't being cut. And Mike's proposal, hasn't even been reviewed by FinCom yet. And I know Mike is working with his departments and I'm working with mine to get to our number. And we're going to have to lay off people with the current number that we have. And it won't be many, but we'll have to do something. But if we go on the 1/12th, I guess what I'm suggesting to you is I don't have a choice but to unemploy even more people, recognizing that I may recall them, but it's going to have a significant cost to the unemployment line item.
And that was, I'm glad you brought that up, because that was something that I had thought of when you were speaking earlier and neglected to question the fact that we'd be paying unemployment to people that we're going to probably be bringing back anyways.
Well, and my concern is the way the state statute is, and continues to be even after much push, as you know, and council, not only did Lauren counsel for the town, but also our council on the school side said, get to your state delegation and get them to move these dates and all of that other stuff. The fact of the matter is that they can start collecting unemployment on the first day after school ends, which is the 16th of June. So the concern there is that although, I hate to say the word double dip, but that's what it really is. And it's legal and it's done all the time. It's been done I've been in education for 30 years. So my concern is that we're a struggling financial community in general. We have a pandemic. We're doing our best to utilize a number that keeps us from spending more money that we may not have, and then allows for us to recall even less people, because at the end of the day, the practice has always been for every 2 people I lay off, I have to lay off a third, because the town side will say, where's the money coming from? I can't give you the $740 now, I got to give you $520 because you're going to cut 7 people. No, you're actually going to have to cut 10 people because we're going to have to move money into that account. Now, I'll defer to James that it could probably be money that's done later in the year in October. Maybe there's enough there to finish off the year and in there for July 1st, but it does add another cost, just as another useless headache for you folks to have.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Does anyone else have any questions or rotten revenue forecasts?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Kubiak.
I'm trying to make this the last time I say anything. You've heard that before, but
never, Bill.
I know. It basically boils down, in my mind, it's really simple. It doesn't matter whether we think it's going to be safe to hold a town meeting by June 25th whether I think it, Brad, whether you think it, whether Mike thinks it, or whoever. The question that we have to answer is, are the majority of people who would come to the town meeting going to be afraid to come at the end of June? And my opinion, my answer is yes. Look at how the governor is phasing things in right now. And it's obvious that in a month from now, I don't think we're going to be in a position. And so you, in essence, in my mind, you disenfranchise people from voting. People who would normally go to town meeting, not that there's that many of them, but I don't think they'll go because of health. And the ones that do, that feel an obligation, are going to have to make a decision at that point, still in, I believe, what will still be in a state of emergency at that time. Do I go and do my civic duty and risk my health? I don't think we want to put them in that position. And I don't think we should. I understand perfectly what the superintendent's saying, and he's right. There's going to be costs, and it's going to require working around, and it's going to require a whole bunch of things. But the bottom line is, do you think the people of Norton will feel comfortable coming, not just comfortable, but safe, coming to a town meeting at that time? I don't think there's any way in hell that they will. And I don't think they should have to. I think it's a really good idea if you put the meeting off until at least the end of July and give us a chance. What you decide to do on this, and saying you're going to do it on June 25th and then delaying. God, people have no idea when anything is right now. They have no idea. They think they know when the election is. They don't know if town meeting is June 8th or if it's June 25th or it's going to be July or Christmas or what the heck it's going to be. I would, give them some certainty or some relative certainty, and let them know when that's going to be. I think it's up to you folks tonight to put the safety of the people as a priority. It's going to cost, but it's not going to cost, so much that it's going to be a problem. You either have town meeting or you don't. It seems to me that what we're trying to get to is a way to kind of get around town meeting, to have town meeting, but not have town meeting. And, if you're going to eliminate town meeting, eliminate town meeting. If you're going to keep it, then let it do its job and let people be safe. So that's what I think. And I know whatever you guys do, it's a difficult decision, and I wish you much luck.
Thank you, Bill. Is anyone else?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
None of us know what's going to happen with COVID-19. We hear that there could be a second wave in the fall that could be worse. So maybe October's town meeting is trying to have a meeting in October would be worse than it is now. But things are opening up. People are going to the store. Churches are opening this Sunday. We're expecting 100 people in a room that can fit 300. Just something to consider.
Anyone else have anything to add?
Is the chair entertaining a motion?
I'll entertain a motion. It's just that I'm kind of at a loss myself. So, but yeah, I'll definitely entertain a motion if you have one.
So again, like with all due respect to Joe and Mike, I mean, I understand that it's more work, but and potentially more money, but life versus money, life is always going to win. And that, as Bill indicated, the purpose of town meeting and Bob said this as well, is to have discussion. And if folks don't feel comfortable to come out, I don't think that they're going to come out. And I think that we've lost the essence of what local government is. So, Brad, I'm going to suggest or motion that the board supports the annual town meeting to be held on Saturday, July 25th.
Is there a second for that?
I'll second that, Brad.
Okay. Any comments? Any comments or questions regarding July 25th, 2020 as the potential town meeting date?
This is, can I say something? This is James Puello, the town accountant.
Certainly, James.
If we go to July 25th, that means we're gonna have to also prepare a 1/12 budget for August in case that meeting doesn't happen. I really think that if you're not able to go to the meeting in June because you're not comfortable going out, you're probably not gonna go in July either. I mean, 4 weeks is not gonna make that huge of a difference. So it's kind of an uncertainty, but I would have preferred if they had gone with the Saturday, June 27th, either outside or indoors. Try that, and then if we cancel that, then we can go to the plan B, which is the 1/12 budget. That would be my preference. I just wanted to get that out there.
Any rebuttal or any comments on James's suggestion?
Brian Clark's here. I would
Yes.
agree with James on that as well. I've already prepared a 1/12 budget, but it's just not as easy as it sounds to do, which I'm not afraid of the work, but I think everybody needs to know where we stand going forward. And I agree with James. Another 4 weeks isn't really going to matter.
Anyone? Jack, I see you on my screen. Do you have a comment?
Another comment I wanted to add is,
Yes.
if my parents were vulnerable and sick, I wouldn't let them go in July. Myself, I would be like, you can't go, that's it. We cannot accommodate everyone. I know that's the way it should be, but unfortunately, these are different times now. We may not even have a town meeting in October, who knows? But if we have at least a town meeting or try to have a town meeting in June, it will give us a starting point. The later we postpone it, it's gonna make the calculation of free cash and the close out of the old fiscal year and everything else more difficult. We could run into a problem with setting the tax rate in time, and if we don't have a town meeting in October either. So there is a lot of possibilities of things that could go wrong. And I think people are going out to the stores right now to buy food, to the gas station. There is more risk, I think, going to the gas station or to a grocery store right now than there would be if we plan out a town meeting with a month in advance and separate them out, and we follow the procedures that the Board of Health was suggesting earlier.
Anyone else? Personally, I still like the idea of having one potentially in June, but possibly, while I think having an outdoor one would be difficult for many reasons, I think before we discount that, throw it out, possibly the committee that's been working on the logistics for an indoor committee, meeting, possibly they could work for this coming week to give us a feedback on how a outdoor meeting could or could not be accommodated.
So, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I will bring that back to the group, and I'm going to probably bring Chris Carmichael into the group to talk about the ADA portion of things. I will say this: I totally understand the fear. I understand why people would be nervous about June, and I agree with James that if you're nervous about June, you're probably going to be nervous in July as well. However, the one thing I can say is that if we have town meeting in a high school or even outside, whichever it might be, regardless, everybody's wearing masks. Now let's go back to the face covering mandate by the state. That is when you cannot socially distance. You're supposed to be wearing a mask when you're outside. When it's impossible to socially distance, you wear a mask. we're not only going to wear masks, but we're going to socially distance. So we're doing double coverage. I think that, you know, I think the risk is worse when I go to Lowe's right now, because there's not one person in that place paying attention to any kind of sanitizing or cleanliness. They're more worried about their bottom line dollar. And right now, you know, we're looking at every professional in the town, as well as volunteers from MRC, NEMA, and CERT involved with making sure that everybody stays safe. You can't go anywhere right now where there's somebody following you around to make sure you're safe. So I do believe that regardless of when we have the meeting, and I'm not pushing for any date. That's on you. That's on the board. I'm just saying that I think that we can make that meeting safer than going anywhere else right now.
Okay. Any other comments?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Units.
based on the governor's timeline right now, if we were to hold a meeting on the 25th or the 27th, by the 29th, restaurants are open somewhat. Movie theaters are gonna open on the 29th. So having 100 people in an area that can fit 300, if everything is opening up by then, obviously the governor's plan is that things are gonna be better by then.
Anyone
I
else?
think the important thing with that, Mike, is that that is based on a number of indicators that all need to be positive. I think there's 6 different ones that all need to be trending. And I absolutely understand what you're saying about, you know, we'll have better visibility closer to that. However, I think we also need to take in mind the mindset of people who are gonna come and want to participate. And I don't feel that people are going to be comfortable coming in June. And maybe in July, when there's been 7 weeks, 8 weeks of positive trends, people will be like, you know what, it's okay to go up there. And this is in no way an indictment of the plan that Chris presented earlier. I think it's awesome. You're doing belt and suspenders. I don't think it's possible to do anything more. And it's not about people not feeling safe because we're not doing enough, or sorry, you're not doing enough. It's just the uncertainty, and people don't know how to quantify uncertainty. And the only thing that's going to help us is more time to understand what the real situation looks like. Every week, things are changing. CDC is issuing new guidance. The Governor Baker is issuing new guidance. The state opened up on Monday, and we got the press conference at 11 saying that things could open that day. So it's hard to plan, and I'm more comfortable taking more time to understand the situation, to plan more robustly and adapt to the next 8 weeks or so of data that are going to tell us how best to hold this meeting and hopefully get people to participate. Because ultimately, town meeting is like one of the purest American forms of democracy. And we're not going to get that if we're just doing a perfunctory, come in, rubber stamp the budget and get the hell out. That's not why we're there. I've heard that from Bill. I've heard that from Mr. Kimball, and several others. We need to be able to do town meeting justice. And we're not going to be able to do that in June, in my opinion. But I'm one voice of 5, so I defer to my colleagues if anyone may vote on this.
I would just say that, see, I'm not afraid to set the date of June 25th, and if things aren't improving, saying I was wrong, we should push it out a couple more weeks. But I think it would make more sense to shoot for an earlier date with the idea that, I mean, that we can always push it out. We can't pull it in.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I tend to agree with you on this. And I also understand what Mr. Gabea was referring to before, where people don't know which way is up at the moment. That being said, and while it may be confusing, I think we're trying to do what's best for everybody involved. Our department heads, our constituency, the health of people, the good of the overall town. So you know, I don't know. I'm not Fauci. You know, I have no idea what this thing's going to do. I can't prognosticate what the COVID's going to look like tomorrow, in July, in October, whenever it is. So I don't think there's any harm in having a Saturday date. You know, I'm not crazy about the outside, but I'd rather have it in June outside than I would to potentially, you know, wait through July or, you know, maybe August. And at what point does it become palatable that we end up just doing what we were going to do in June in August, September, because we need to get something accomplished. So just my thoughts. I think if we shoot for the 27th or the 25th, which whatever that Saturday is, if it doesn't come to fruition, it doesn't come to fruition, and we go from there. But like Jack, just one thought, and it's you know, just my own preference.
Anyone else? Okay, we have a motion and a second to schedule the meeting for July, I can't remember the date now.
25th.
25th. That's Saturday, July 25th. No further discussion. We'll go to the vote. Renee?
Yes.
Mary?
No.
Jack?
Yes.
Mike?
No.
And I'm also going to vote for no. Personally, I think that we should, for the 27th of June, Saturday, we can decide at a later date after the planning committee has looked at the possibilities of being able to hold it outside and still meet the ADA requirements and all other requirements for holding the meeting. And that way there, if things don't improve enough and people aren't comfortable, we can always push it out. But I'd rather try our best to get it within this fiscal year. Anyone else?
Chair entertaining a motion.
Certainly.
Motion to select Saturday, June 27th as the date for the annual town meeting.
Okay. The only thing, I'd like to get clarification from Mr. Units on whether or not we have the date, but do we have to also have the time, or can we add that later?
We can do that next week.
Okay. So the chair will accept the motion to hold the annual town meeting on June 27th, it's a Saturday.
Second.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? Hearing no discussion, we'll go to a vote. Renee?
No.
Mary?
Yes.
Jack?
No.
Mike?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. Okay. So it passes 3-2. Okay. Next item on our agenda is a vote to open a special town meeting. Mr. Units?
I don't think you have to do that, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I know we had checked last week and we have nothing pending. So we will not have a special town meeting. If there's no further business, Chair will entertain a motion to go into executive session. Let me read my declaration. I hereby declare under General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 22A, A3, that the purpose of executive session will be to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining. Because the discussion strategy in open session could compromise the purpose of the executive session, and with the board not to return to open session at the conclusion of the executive session. Chair would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
I gotta read the thing.
Right, the motion has to be made specific.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was on mute while I was yakking away.
Okay.
That the board go into executive section under general law, chapter 30A, section 21A3.
Yeah, I said that part. I want you to do the motion part.
That's what I'm doing.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep, that's right. For the purposes and reasons declared by the chairman and with the board not to return to open session thereafter.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. It's a roll call vote as usual. Everything is now. Renee?
Yes.
Jack?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
And I also vote yes. Thank you, everybody, for all the work you're doing, and we look forward to the report on the possibility of outside town meetings maybe next week. The report, not the town meeting. Okay. Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right on.
Bye.